JD.
Yeah.
Hey there. Is this Jennifer?
This is Jennifer and Joanna.
Hey, Jennifer and Joanna. This is Sionne with SnapAP, and my colleague JD, who's co-founder and chief technical officer, both on the line here.
Okay.
Hello. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet both of you. So I have to ask, because I always forget, how did you find us? Were you just Googling, or just let us know how you stumbled across SnapAP today?
I think I had an email, and I think we may have talked to you about a year or two ago.
Okay, perfect. Well, welcome back.
Thank you.
So when you were talking a year ago, has the business evolved since then? Are you like revisiting, looking at solutions? Like where are you kind of in your decision-making process at the moment?
Getting closer. And yes, we're growing. Joanna has been with us for about 4 months now. So just changes going on. We have a new plant coming up and running probably in the next year or so.
Okay.
So just realizing that we really need to do something.
Good. That's the best kind of situation to be in. That's where we can add some value. So Jennifer, you did share some information in terms of volume of invoices and your process. Would you mind just as a narrative, like just give us a couple of minutes on how it currently works and remind us of the software that you're using, just so we have proper context, and then we can show you how we can support that, support and or improve that process with SnapAP.
Okay. I currently get invoices via email, the majority of them. Few come in the mail. I print them and then enter them into our ERP system, which is IQMS.
Okay.
I'm hand entering invoice numbers, dates, matching POs, and then printing checks. We do some virtual credit card payments.
Okay.
A few wires.
And a few wires.
So a lot of manual work, and then you plant trees on the weekend to make up for all the paper that you're printing out.
Right.
Okay, that's good. JD, do you have questions, or you want to just kind of move into the software? In terms of, go ahead, sorry.
I think I may have some questions as we go, but I think we can always show a piece of the tool and have it more of an interaction process.
Sounds good. And just as JD's pulling up the demo screen, are you managing AP for multiple locations as well?
No, just
yes. We do all the plans.
Yes, yes. It's all done in our corporate office, but it is for 4 different locations.
Okay, perfect. And are those locations within the U.S., or are you dealing with international locations as well?
U.S.
Okay, good to know. Go ahead, JD.
One question I would have before I start is, do you guys have dedicated buyers?
Meaning what?
Like, do you have a procurement process or a procurement office as well, or is how is your procurement tied to your accounts payable?
Yes, we do have a procurement department, and yes, they work heavily with setting up the vendors and.
Okay, so maybe I can show the full scope, including the procurement as well. I guess I'll start with it, and if it's something that's interesting, I'll continue showing it, and if it's out of scope, then I'll just skip.
Yeah. I guess that would be our first question. Is this something we can pick and choose the parts we need, or is it
Correct. Yes. So the system is modular. On the demo site, most of the features are turned on. There's some some features are turned off, like capital appropriation and some modules like that, but most modules are turned on. And I'll show you some of those modules, but they're all modular, where they can be turned on or off.
Okay.
We can interface with your procurement system, or if you issue your POs through your ERP, we can go get the POs from the ERP, or we can create them here, or we can do hybrid. It depends on the workflow that you guys want.
Okay.
So this is the first page of the tool, and it's a portal that the internal employees would log into, as well as suppliers that are onboarded on the system. Snap AP has an automatic onboarding process for suppliers, but there's also a process to onboard them manually if you would want to. So the first thing I would do is I would log in with a supplier access, because the supplier screen is I guess the simpler version of the tool. So this is a mobile device and service supplier. Oh, actually, this is a French version. Let me move it to English. So this supplier would have all these POs open here. These POs that you see are all POs that have not yet been fully invoiced. So POs that are open for this supplier. You'll notice there are some that are different colors. Some are light blue and some are white. The ones that are light blue are service type POs, and the ones that are white are either a material or an inventory type PO or stock PO. The ones that you see with the plus sign here means that there's an invoice or many invoices underneath it, so it's been partially invoiced. And you can also see the value of the PO and the not invoiced amount, or the amount remaining open on the PO. And those two new POs that you see on the top here do not have a PO number. That's because the supplier has not yet approved the terms of service on those POs. So if I click on one of those POs for review, I can look at the PO. This one is gone to assessing, so it's gone to the buyer. And the suppliers put a comment saying that the price on line 1 should be different than what it is now. And it is up to the buyer to change it. If the revision on this PO would cause the amount to change, internally we would send the PO for approval. Those modules of PO approvals and all that are all switches that we can turn on or off, but like I explained on the demo site, they're all on. So in this case, if the supplier would agree to those terms, you would click accept here, and we would generate a PO number for him. And then the screen would look like this. This is a PO that has been accepted. It's for a certain amount of quantity, and there's a certain amount outstanding on it. And the supplier can enter an invoice against it. If the supplier were, is there any question?
The PO is generated after the service has been performed.
No, we generate the POs. We grab POs before service are rendered.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Just in the demo, it goes really fast.
Okay.
If a supplier wants to invoice against this PO, you would click on the Enter Invoice button. But at this point, the supplier has agreed to the terms. So we basically flip the PO into an invoice. We ask him for an invoice number. We ask him to attach a copy of his internal invoice. This is optional in the demo site, but it can be made mandatory, or it can be removed completely, dependent on your process internally. And then we ask him to key in the quantity that he plans on invoicing. Or you can click invoice all and invoice the full amount of that PO. Now on the invoice tab, here the supplier sees all invoices that are not yet paid and that are close to be due. So this is the equivalent of a supplier statement. So all the invoices that are keyed in and awaiting for payment. So every invoice that have been paid, we store them in history. So these are all the open invoice for that supplier. There's some statuses here that you can see. Some are payment processing, meaning that this invoice has been sent to the bank and the payment is processing at the bank. This one, we are awaiting a receipt. So the supplier has not yet delivered the goods for this, invoice. This one's been approved. So this one's been sent to the ERP and it's awaiting payment. But in this case, the system would have moved it, but being the demo site, the system doesn't automatically move them up when they reach their due date. Sent for approval, it means that somebody internally is awaiting to approve it. The supplier cannot see on whose desk this invoice is awaiting approval, but I'll show you some internal screens and you'll see it a little bit differently here. Are you guys dealing with multi-currency or US only, or?
Mostly US only.
Okay.
At this point, yeah.
Okay. So in the case of multi-currency, we would show a little bit of a different thing here, but we'll skip that for now. If you look at one of the invoices for this supplier, it's basically the same as what we just keyed in. The supplier can recall it, can download it in PDF with attachments, or just this invoice in PDF. Under history, we have the closed purchase orders, the invoice that have been paid. The payments are all the remittance advice. We do have a cash manager that I can show a little bit later for EFTs and checks. If you want to choose or continue paying in whatever form that you're using today, we have an optional process in here where we can send a remittance advice to a supplier, either with a link directly to his payment or with a PDF attached to an email. But I'll show you what a remittance advice looks like. So there's still those pluses where you can see the invoices underneath the payment. And if we look at this remittance advice, we see the invoice that were paid, the invoice date, the gross amount, discounts if we would have captured any discounts based on the terms, and then the amount that was paid. And then the supplier has the help tab where you can self-serve if there's any need. And that's it. That's very simple. It's the view of the supplier. If the supplier had in the case of a franchisee, and they want to log in with like a head office, the screen would be a little bit different, but the functionality would be very similar to what I just showed. Any questions for the supplier view?
So what you've shown us so far would be our vendors would be logging into SnapAP.
Correct.
Okay.
So in the US, our run rate, if you will, of customers that we've onboarded is about 86%. So when a customer starts with SnapAP, SnapAP onboards automatically the suppliers, and about 86% of them start using the system right away. There's always a percentage that will not onboard themselves in. So I'll show you a flow, an internal flow for the accounts payable resource.
Okay.
So the next person I can log in with is a buyer.
JD, sorry to interject. I just wanted to get feedback from the two of you. Is this something you think your suppliers would use? I know some organizations have said, I don't think our suppliers would use that, or in other instances, they don't want suppliers to use it. What we've observed, as JD mentioned, fairly high uptake on the side of the suppliers because it makes it easier for them to self-serve. There's a lot less back and forth communication on status of payable invoices. Do you have any feedback on that interface, or whether or not your suppliers would use that portal?
Yeah, this is totally new to me, and I do see the advantages for, like you said, the suppliers. Number one, the invoice would get there faster. It would be completely up to them.
Right.
In our system, and two, it's great visibility for them. They wouldn't have to reach out to anyone to find out, where their payment is. in the process. And but I don't have a feel. And I think that the biggest wall we would hit right now is we currently purchasing the purchase orders in IQMS. We've been on that 3 years, and we're strongly suggested to use it to the max.
Yep, that's fair.
Okay,
So,
and what would happen is that process would remain. We would automatically grab the purchase order from your ERP at this point.
okay. So one of our questions will be, as we go through this, is how heavy a support do you need on IT just to get us up and running?
So we've looked at the ERP you're using, and it's a fairly complete ERP. They have APIs. They have basically everything we need to interface ourselves. So that's something we can look at once we get to the end of that process.
Yeah.
But it would probably be very minimal.
And let me just add on, because I'm sure all of the potential vendors that you speak with, everyone makes it seem like it's very easy. I just want to reinforce that we've done this quite a few times with a number of different ERPs, and we actually have, it's not called a universal connector, but it's similar to that. If there's an API that exists for your existing ERP, and if your IT department is willing to assist, so we don't need to like take it over for 3 weeks, but they can actually answer some questions, it should be relatively easy. I want to give you guys the confidence that that's not going to be any kind of a bottleneck if we were to move forward with this at all.
Okay.
Have you guys customized your ERP? Do you have an IT team that made new modules or customized it?
I believe so.
Okay, so that's one of the pieces where I think we stand out, is that we can interface with custom ERPs. We can even interface with multiple ERPs, actually. We have a customer in Australia that was in the process of acquiring another company, and we just connected to both ERPs at the same time. And there's no real limit to that. It's not a blocker. Most of the time, the interface is fairly easy. It's just about the same with every ERP, the way that they work internally and the data that we need. We need the GL, and we need the supplier list, and we need the trigger when the PO gets created, and we need a place to insert an invoice and capture payment or not, dependent on your flow. Now, we do have all that mapped as well. We have all the APIs, all the fields that we require, everything is mapped.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'd make a recommendation that if we get to a point where, you know, you're considering going forward with Snap AP, perhaps we can interface with your IT team, and they might have some questions as to how we would execute that integration or the implementation, and we can kind of remove that layer of concern. But from our side, we don't anticipate that as being a blocker. It's part of how we try to differentiate ourselves in terms of integrating with existing legacy systems or your ERP that sits in the background.
Okay. Yeah, I agree, definitely.
Okay, so I'll log in with the buyer just to show you, and I'll go a little bit quickly because I know that you guys are probably not going to use this functionality, but I'll just show it anyway and go through it real quickly. So this would be the view of an internal employee. In this case would be Jen, the buyer. And what you can see is that she's got a lot more options than a supplier. These are all the POs that are either tied to her, that she bought, that is being approved by one of her supervisor, or that is part of her project, if she has a project that spans on multiple companies or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are still internal, some of them are in defect, and some of them are being sent to have been sent to the supplier. The ones that you see here are internal, and they're awaiting approval by some people. If, for example, your system would create a PO and you would want just the approval piece to be done in Snap AP, is something that we can do as well. Or we can go all the way and start at the requisition and then send the requisition to your ERP or whatever that process is. We're very flexible on that end. But in this case, you can see Jen has a PO, has a few POs. These are internal. She can click on an approver's name and send a canned email where she can customize it and to ask for it to be expedited. And the approver then has a copy of this and can move on with it. I can show you how to key in a requisition. I think I'll skip it if you guys don't plan to use it too much. The receipt are the packing slip. Now, do you guys how do you key in your packing slip currently? Do you key it into your ERP directly, or do you have another inventory system perhaps, or how does that work?
We don't key it into the system.
At all?
No.
Okay, so in this case, you could use this system to key it in. If you use our system to key the receipt in, it's very similar to keying in an invoice. And then we do the three-way match on it automatically. If we do not have a receipt, then what we do is a two-way match. And with a two-way match, we require the approval by a person. On a three-way match, we can approve the invoice based on the price on the PO and the quantity on the packing slip, and we can automate that approval.
We do a lot of just the two-way match.
Okay, so I can show you that process of a two-way match as well. With a three-way match, the process with it is, or the benefit that you get out of it is it's easier. One, it's easier for your approvals at the end of the month because we can push the packing slip to the ERP.
Mm-hmm.
When it's two-way match, you need to accrue them. But there's a way to pull all those as a total. I'll show you that in a minute when we log in with an AP resource. And then the three-way match is automatic. With a two-way match, it requires somebody to come and click and say, yes, I approve this expense or this invoice. So that's basically it, the quick version of a buyer. I won't show how to key in a requisition or any of that. I'll let that to you if you decide you want to move that route. I'll log in with an approver. So this would be somebody who potentially has a team underneath him or her, and he's responsible for a certain amount in budget, and he needs visibility on projects and on expense and on things like that. So everything that we sent for approval, any document or any process that we have where somebody's required to approve something, we send him an email with a link directly to whatever document that he needs to approve. But if he logs into the site directly, like I just did, we get to see a dashboard of all the documents that are awaiting approval by this person. So here you can see there's some POs that are awaiting approval, there's some invoices, and there's one expense report from one of his team members. If he clicks on review here and look at this invoice, there's a few things that he can do. He can see the chart of accounts and he can modify it if it doesn't hit the proper GL. And this, for example, these words that you see here, it's all customizable to whatever is inside your ERP for your GL. I believe when we demoed this last, or these numbers come from Microsoft AX. But for JD Edwards, I know that it's plant object, subsidiary, subledger type. And I don't know what it is in your ERP, but whatever it is, that's what we would show here, if it's more than 5 or less than 5. So he can approve it, he can put it on hold, he can send it for a revision, he can reject it. Everybody internally can add notes, and when we add note, we can also add a file, but those stay internal. The supplier never see these notes, but we can attach a document and attach a note to all our documents. And all our documents have an audit trail that shows all the actions that happened on one document. So for example, this one was entered by an AP, an approval email was sent to Beth, and Beth approved it. And then another email was sent to Tony because he's the second approver in the list.
So the first question that I would get from an approver is, when I'm traveling and it comes across the email on my cell phone, can I approve it?
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
So you would just click on the link. It would bring you to this document, and you would see it like you do here, and you click on approve, and that would be the end of that. Yeah, we get that a lot, especially on the expense report. People key those in as they're traveling, and most of the time they do it on a mobile device.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys have an expense report module? Should I show that, or should I just skip over that? Or
We use Concur right now.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would skip it for now.
so we can either interface with it or leave it completely alone. I don't know if Concur creates an invoice for you to approve, or how you move the expense through your payables. Anyway, we'll skip it for now.
Yeah, we'll skip it for now.
Okay.
Fairly new, but I know that there's some that aren't happy with it, so we won't get in that mix yet. we'll stay
Concur is a pretty
majority.
big. Yeah, I've got experience with Concur with other customers. They're pretty big, and I like the system quite a bit, but I've never used it as an employee. We also have some of our customers that are using American Express Travel. We do have a direct link, computer-to-computer link with American Express Travel. We don't have one with Concur, but I'm sure we could do it if you would want to do your approval outside of Concur. But if you don't want to, it's fine as well. This tab here will just disappear from your version.
Okay.
And the employee here, Tony can set up the delegation, can manage the team and the approval levels, and the project association. These things that he can do here, that may be inside your ERP already. There may be a delegation that you do inside the ERP. We would just grab it there if that would be the case, as well as your approval levels. I can show you what it looks like if Tony would go for a vacation. Here he cannot change his own name. I'll show you another access in an accounts payable person as an elevated access and can delegate somebody on behalf of somebody. But in this case, I can only delegate myself to somebody else and pick a time and date. And then if a document would come for approval during that time, the audit would show that person X approved on behalf of Tony. But Tony would still be copied and would receive all the emails during that time. Under history, we got requisition, purchase order, receipts, invoice, expense reports, and payments. These are the same as a supplier. These are all stuff that happened in the past. We don't archive. We basically keep it forever. But these are all documents that have been paid or have been completed. I'll log in with an AP employee. This is a higher level of access. There's also admin, and there's a system setup that would be, I guess, above AP. Admin is a view-only access, but has access to view everything. AP can be multi-company. This one here, I believe, is a single company AP employee. And then there's a system setup access, which most of our customers is using that through the IT department, but that would be to manage the settings like the company currency, if there's a mandatory relocation account, or things like that, if a module should be turned on or off, or things like that.
Okay.
Well, I'll log on with AP. Most AP screens load empty, and the AP requires to search because they have access to too much data. The way our search works is it's inclusive. So if I, for example, search for 95, well, in this case, there's only one. I'll search for 9. And you'll see there's a bunch of PO that contains the number 9. It doesn't necessarily need to start or end with the number. As long as it contains it, it's going to find it. All the screens that you see like this, where there's multiple data in it, we can export them to Excel. Either they're purchase order, receipts, invoice, or anything else. This access has a little bit more elevation, so they can see the invoice that hasn't been received, or the invoice without a receipt, and the packing slip without an invoice. And we can drill down onto those and see a receipt that has not been matched to any invoices, and then we can expand the invoices line to the receipt line and see why wouldn't it match. If you look here, there's a little note icon on this invoice because this invoice has a note tied to it. When we're logged in internally underneath AP, we can see the GL that these invoices are hitting. Here we show the GL at the header, but the way the GL works in the system is one or part of a line, as well as the tax. In this case, the taxes are exempt. But should there be a tax on this line, we would show that the tax is hitting a different GL account. So we can have, for example, line 1 could be hitting this GL account at 50% and then another GL for the remainder of the amount. Then accounts payable also have the accounts tab. Here we can pull documents by GL. So for example, I could search for 420 or 40 or finance, and this would pull all the accounts, all the invoices that are hitting this GL account.
That's nice.
Then we have the expense, okay, then we have the employee. So there's a little bit more access for AP. An AP can delegate somebody else. So she can delegate bill to Anne, for example, for a certain date. If an employee is terminated, that would be managed through the team approval and delegation, or this screen, where she can see there's these are the approval limit above Anne. So Anne's boss is Tony, Tony's boss is Bill, and Jeff is the boss of Bill. And then there's a master approver that will hit anything that the VP doesn't have the budget to approve. Under metrics, we have the invoice that have been entered, the invoice cycle time, the payment processes. So these are metrics. It's just a reporting of what happened and when and by who and things like that. So we can see who keyed what and at what level. So we can drill down and see more and more of the volume. And then under history, Anne is able to see the same thing as everybody else, but she can also see the emails. So these would be all the emails that the system has sent out. So she can see, for example, Tony just received this email. This is the email that he received, and this is the link within the email. She clicks on it, brings her to the document that Tony was supposed to approve. She can approve on behalf of Tony because she's got the authority. She can do basically. She can also modify the chart of accounts and assign it to a different GL. If she goes under the invoices tab, there's a non-PO invoice here. So those would be all the invoices that are not tied to a purchase order. So I don't know if you guys issue POs for things like electricity bills or petty cash, but most of the time the non-PO invoice are to manage invoices like that, tax, petty cash, or whatever doesn't require a PO.
Can I ask, so these invoices, how does the data get into SnapAP?
So we get the data from the PO. For everything that's underneath the PO, we get the data from the PO. It's the same as I showed for the supplier, where we ask the invoice number and if the quantity is different, if the PO has not been fully invoiced, for example. If your POs are generated from your ERP, we would grab all that data from your ERP.
But you wouldn't have invoice numbers and
That's
dates.
right. So I'll show you that process, for example. I'll show you an open PO here. I'll grab, these one are awaiting approval. Let me grab this one. So this PO here that you see, this is hitting this, all this data that you see here, we would have grabbed from your ERP automatically. So all of this would come out of your ERP, including your GL, your line, your description, and everything you want to buy. If you click enter invoice, all that data, well, this is saying that this supplier has been onboarded and has invoiced underneath this PO. So you got to proceed with caution if you want to override whatever a supplier has put in. See, we were asking you for an invoice number and a different quantity. So let's say 1, 2, 3 is the invoice number, and 1 on line 1. I would save that, submit, and that's it. The invoice been entered.
So when an invoice comes to my email, I would have to open that email, look at the invoice, and then take the data from that and manually key it in.
Correct. You would key in the invoice number and the amount on the line. Everything else we would grab from the ERP.
And if it's a non-PO invoice?
Well, there's two ways for non-PO invoice. I can show you the manual entryway because that's the only one we have set up on the demo. And the other one is an OCR. So you would grab an invoice from your email and it would scan. You would attach the PDF and it would just grab the information out of the PDF. It would fill the screen up automatically. I'll show you what it looks like. So it would, the company you would have to pick there and the supplier, but then the invoice number would be keyed in, but I'll key in manually just to show you what it looks like. The approver you have to select. There's no way for us to know what the approver is. And then the lines would be all here, but I'll key one to show you. The GL, you can provide one at the header, but I'll just add this one. Like that. So it would look like that, right? But these are only for non-PO, because when we don't have the PO, we have nothing to base ourselves on to grab what the information is. So either they are keyed in like that or we OCR them in. But if they're underneath a PO, then there's no need to do that. We can just flip the PO to the invoice. And most of the time, those are managed by the suppliers. So there's a really small volume. The non-PO stays in AP, but everything that's underneath a PO, a good percentage of them never, it's the supplier that keys them in. So you would just never receive an invoice by email.
So if our suppliers aren't keying in their data, that's up to AP to enter all that.
Yeah.
So where does the OCR come in?
The OCR comes in, so basically it's this screen, this exact same screen, and it comes in underneath the non-PO here. I don't have that turned on for the demo side, but it would fill the screen exactly like it's here.
Instead of manually.
Yeah, JD, did you ladies want us to show you the OCR screen? Because I mean, we can activate that fairly easily if you want to see that.
Well,
process.
I can't. I just removed it from the demo site. I didn't think about that we were going to demo that today. I just turned it off, and I can't easily turn it on anymore.
Okay. Well, what we could do is we could follow up with another demo session if that's something that we wanted to, because we want to basically support your existing workflow as much as possible. And what I'm hearing is there's maybe a minor disconnect at this moment, but we do have that OCR feature that could be could remove the requirement to actually manually key things in if it's not being provided by the supplier.
Right, but what I'm hearing is we would still manually receive it, right?
So
what is the process of an invoice comes to the AP email box? What happens then? How does your technology, your OCR, get that from my email?
So we're not interfaced with your email. So you would drag and drop that file into our screen, and we would OCR it.
Okay, so it has to get into this application. And then are the invoices actually saved?
Yeah, we save the attachments. All the attachments are saved in the cloud, or unless you want it on-prem. It depends on whatever your structure is. We support both.
So you would save the PDF, but you wouldn't really extract the data?
So we do extract the data when we get the invoice from OCR.
Okay.
We also get a fairly high percentage of the invoice will never get OCR because they'll never get into that inbox from the get-go. Because we start at the PO and we send the PO to the supplier electronically, most suppliers just self-serve. I'd say what we've seen in Canada was about 96%. In Australia was similar. In the US, we were running at 86%. Some US suppliers also want to do EDI. I don't know if you have any suppliers that do that or not, or computer to computer. So they would count outside that 86%. But a lot of suppliers just self-serve, and the ones that do not, we either OCR them in or we flip the PO into an invoice, because the data entry when we flip the PO into an invoice is very small. It's actually less than any other process, because we get a lot of data, like all the GL information and all that, which is impossible to get from an OCR. We do have a default GL that we can assign to a supplier when we OCR their invoices, and we do have a template per supplier and all those things, but it's still, there's a lot less data entry, and the flow is a lot faster by flipping the purchase order into an invoice. And that's the type of things that you'll see as I guess as you use a system, as you get to learn it. Most of our competition are looking either directly into a mailbox to grab an invoice and OCR the data out of it, but the defect rate out of that is really high, and it just adds more work into the finance side. When you do it this way, this is, and I don't want to get too technical, but it's based on Dr. Taguchi for the Taguchi curve, and it's we reduce the defect using this process like a lot. Like it goes down, and the metrics we have is about 35% when you OCR, and we bring it down to less than 2%. But there's a small cost to that, and that is that somebody has to enter an invoice number and enter a quantity at the line. While with OCR, somebody has to look at the data to make sure that whatever's been scanned is real.
Okay. Okay. So we've talked about getting the POs from IQMS into SnapApp. Invoices would be processed here, whether they're PO or non-PO, and there's approval and there's great viewing, but how do we get that back into the general ledger or into our cash disbursement?
So when an invoice is approved, we send it automatically to your ERP at that point.
Okay.
We can also send the GL information. There's two ways that we can send it. Some ERPs like to take the full invoice. Some call it the voucher. Some call it, there's a bunch of words. Yeah. So we would send the entire document if your ERP has an API that can take it. If it doesn't, we'll just send the journal entry. But a lot of times, and I'm pretty confident your ERP would take the full invoice from what I've seen online. The API seems to be very mature, but we have some customers that are running on older ERPs, and they only accept the journal entries.
Okay. Okay, so it's kind of an import, export, or download, upload. There's
no. It's all based on the. Well, it runs every 15 minutes, and it's an automated schedule.
Okay.
Same thing when we grab the POs. It's all automated, and it's on an automatic schedule. And that's something we can. Your IT would be involved into selecting the schedule and stuff like that. That the data gets exchanged. But
right.
all the data that you see here is live, and it's coming from your ERP, and we're pushing it back in as soon as it's approved.
Okay. So what is your implementation time frame?
It varies on if we do the onboarding of your suppliers, if we do the training or you use the material. It depends a lot on the consulting side of it, or if you want to do that. So, but It's something we can look at. It varies between, so we had 2 weeks when supplier or customer just onboard themselves or automatically. and we just tied to their ERP. And we also had projects where we've implemented an ERP with the tool. So it highly depends on what you need in terms of the implementation, and if you have any customization that you require as well.
I would say, just to piggyback on JD's comments, that for most standard implementations with the support of IT, it's around 2 to 4 weeks from signing the contract to actually having people up and running. That's assuming we don't encounter any serious challenges with the ERP integration, which I don't want to sound overconfident, but that's the exception and not the rule. So just to kind of give you, because you're looking for a time frame. So 2 weeks is not impossible, but within 30 days is usually the standard window for an organization such as yours, based on what you've shared with us so far.
Yeah.
Also,
go ahead.
For the accruals, like there's a lot of switches here that are like there's going to be more exploratory discussion as well on to how and what features you guys are interested in, and that will affect our interaction as well. This, for example, would be a way to grab a report of every invoice that needs to be accrued for a month, but we can also automate that. We can also send the accruals automatically to the ERP. There's a lot of stuff that we can do automatically, so we can show you a list of our features, and then dependent on which one you find relevant, that'll change our implementation as well.
Okay. What is your pricing structure?
So we have it's a monthly subscription. Some clients choose to take advantage of the discount for an annual commitment, and some others are just comfortable with going on a month-to-month basis. We basically have tiers of subscription based on volumes of invoice processing. And I think your organization is in the range, if I recall correctly, Jennifer, around 1,200 invoices per month.
Right.
So that would be approximately $1,500 per month for the subscription if you're just going on a month-to-month basis. And that would also include all the modules that we covered here today at no additional cost. So that's just kind of like back of the napkin calculation. We can talk in more detail around that, but that gives you a ballpark on what this would cost.
And as we're growing and the number of invoices increase, what is the next tier?
I would say that you'd be able to go up to as many as 2,000 invoices a month under that tier that I just quoted you. And then what we do for anything above that is we just have a per instance charge for each invoice. And it can be as low as 35 or 40 cents per invoice, but it doesn't accelerate well above. I think maybe as a follow-up, I can just going to give you a little bit of a framing in terms of, okay, if we're at this level but we grew, does it become prohibitive for us? I want to make sure that you're comfortable like on the long term. And I don't see that as being the case. It doesn't go up by a large step or jump, unless you're going to go from 1,000 invoices a month to 100,000, for example.
Right. Okay.
I have a question for you in terms of, do you have a budget set aside for this, or is this something you're trying to make the business case internally to say, okay, we'd have some efficiencies and some savings, and can we cost justify it? Like, how can we help you perhaps sell this internally within the organization?
We're just gathering data right now. We will need to be able to sell this internally. But right now we're just trying to get a grasp on where we're at.
Right. So do you see value potentially in a system like SnapAP?
Possibly.
Good. Have you looked at other solutions, or are we the first or one of the fewer ones you've looked at?
We looked at another.
And, you know, our feelings won't be hurt. Did you like it better or worse, or was it comparable?
It's hard to say yet. We really are in the infancy stages of
Perfect.
gathering data.
No problem.
I tell you what I did like. I like your the demonstration that you showed, jumping right in here and showing us. It has some very nice features. I think it's a different workflow
Yes.
than we thought, and a different way of saving time or having controls than what we were thinking. And because we haven't seen a lot, you know, we didn't know.
No, so I'll
but
tell you.
I really appreciate the demo that you did today.
Good.
That was great. Yeah.
That's good feedback. Thank you very much. So we didn't kind of give you the history of the company. SnapAP was originally a piece of software developed for Six Sigma process improvement consulting business. So going into global multinational organizations and trying to streamline their overall business operations, kind of developed a niche around AP processing and purchasing and procurement workflow. So what you saw today is what a number of really, really large companies, generally speaking, have implemented to, you know, adopt industry best practices. And now we're trying to bring that forward through to, you know, smaller and medium-sized enterprises, which can benefit from it. So the reason why I mention that is just, I'm not saying your way is wrong and ours is better. It's just interesting that this is a workflow that might not be the way you do it currently, but I think over time you might see some efficiencies once everybody kind of got adapted to the new approach.
Change is always hard.
Yes, exactly. That's the most powerful force in the universe is inertia, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the transition that's difficult. People can live well in the before the process, and they live well after the change, but the transition is difficult. And what we've done in our change management in the past is lower that transition, get people out of that transition as fast as possible. And with the system the way it's at, you build confidence in it when you lower the defect rates to practically zero, so that you get free capacity after this point onwards. And where we differentiate ourselves as well is that we're not an AP automating company. We're not an AP company. We're a procure-to-pay company. So we start by making sure that whatever is on the PO is solid and it's agreed on by the supplier, and that the supplier will deliver on these terms. Making sure that whatever flows after that lives from the PO. And a lot of organizations today are grabbing an invoice and generating a PO when that invoice is coming in, and there's a loss of control because of that. And there's a loss, and that loss of control is a source of defect in itself. So we make sure that the approval for the budget happens when the purchase is required, and then the supplier agrees to the term and agrees on what's on the PO. Because we had horror stories. We had some suppliers that were, you know, double shipping or shipping. They were quoting a certain amount and then invoicing a different amount, and the company had no ways to properly match those two things, and then would pay a different amount than what was quoted, and then would realize it when at the end of the flow, where somebody would sign a check, they would realize that the amounts were different, but the goods have been consumed. So those are all things that are highly problematic in this flow. And the way to solve it is by moving the focus of the defect fix at the beginning of the process, as early as it can possibly be, which is the requisition. It's actually before the purchase order. So we start from there. We start from the requisition. But that doesn't mean that if your processes start from the purchase order because you're issuing POs somewhere else, or you have a defined procurement process, that we cannot make sure that whatever is at that stage onwards becomes valid. And one of the things that you can look at as well, if you continue in this process and look at other solutions, there's a lot of solutions out there that will make sure that the data entry, and they concentrate a lot and they sell you a lot on the keying in of the data from the invoice, but then they don't explain what will happen on the financial side should the GL be wrong, or should something happens at the end of the process. So with us, when it hits finance, the document has been validated and is going through.
Right.
Any
Yeah,
other
I can see
questions?
the value of that.
Right. So were there any other questions or anything else that you wanted to see today?
No, you've given us a lot to think about.
Hopefully it's positive and not too much of a headache inducer.
Nope, not at all. Not a headache at all. Great information.
What would you see as next steps? I mean, we're happy to provide another version of this demo if there are other stakeholders involved, or answer questions, interface with IT. Like, we're at your disposal. You let us know what you need from us moving forward.
Okay. I think we have a couple more demos set up next week, and then of course it's Memorial Day weekend.
Right.
And so a lot of people are off, and then of course we're at our month-end close. So I would say, and you know, after the first week of June, are we already in June? We should try to schedule another meeting.
Okay.
And yeah, let's learn some more about SnapApp.
I will do this, Jennifer and Joanna. I'll send you just a high-level pricing quote, like just to give you as a point of reference. And then I'll make a note that we'll follow up to book something for the first week of June if we haven't heard from you by then. So we can maintain the momentum and see what next steps might actually be in terms of possibly moving forward.
Okay, and we'll have a conversation with IT by then, and get a feel how much they're willing to.
We like to get along with IT. I know it's a bit of a stereotype at times, but we like to be the exception of, wow, those guys were really easy to work with, and vice versa. And we'd love to prove that to you guys if we need to.
Right, and I guess, you know, we should probably have a conversation with purchasing too, which is something we hadn't thought of.
Right.
We were thinking this was all
Right. That's where
exclusive.
my wheels are turning on that aspect of it, the interaction with purchasing and what their involvement in this would be. That's what I'm processing right now.
Of course.
And it can either be completely transparent, or it can be, well, it can be as involved as they want, because we can either create the POs here and push it to the ERP. We can grab it from the ERP. We can approve it here, or we can grab the approved PO. Like there, and we've all done these with different customers. It depends on their workflows. But because we're procure to pay, we start from the PO is our main document here. Our intent to buy is our main document. The master of those documents flowing down after that.
Okay. That's good.
Thank you
Perfect.
so much. We
Thank
actually
you.
enjoyed this. It was a good exchange, and we always like to get feedback, which we appreciate from you. I have some follow-ups, and I'll make a note that hopefully we'll be talking before too long. And you guys enjoy your Memorial Day weekend. There'll be some barbecuing, I hope. The weather will cooperate, and kick off the summer season.
Yeah, we would like some summer weather.
Wouldn't we all?
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Okay.
had snow yesterday.
You did?
That's just that's heartbreaking.
It is. It really is. Well, we turn our heat on, turn it off, on, off. Haven't had any air on.
That's right. That's that bridge season where it's like if you're in like a large building and the HVAC is like, they think it's summer and it's like too cold or too hot. It's a hard time of year.
Yeah. And all we want to do is warm up, right?
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah.
We waited a long time. Please give us the few months of summer that we deserve.
With construction.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll be in touch.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.